Today for our very first Facebook Live. We're the Climate and Energy Project. We're super excited to talk to you today about distributed generation in Kansas. The Climate and Energy Project is a 10-year-old nonprofit based here in Hutchinson, Kansas. We really focus on energy and the environment. We're a solutions-based organization who does a lot of work at the policy level at the Kansas legislature, but also a lot of work at the Kansas Corporation Commission, which is the regulating entity for electricity. And so today we're here to talk to you about distributed generation in Kansas. With me is Olga Hakova, one of our program directors. We also have some behind-the-scenes staff, Jamie Hoffling and Rachel Mislivy, making this all come together today. So thanks for joining us. We're really fortunate that Kansas has great renewable energy and energy efficiency potential. The Kansas Corporation Commission is the regulating agency, as I said, who makes the policies for that opportunity for energy efficiency and renewable energy. The KCC is right now reviewing some different rate designs and policies that are going to impact both our current and our future energy development, specifically around distributed generation. We have a docket number, and that is kind of a legal case that you have to, that the commission uses while they're making decisions about how we how our energy is paid for. So that's all about distributed generation.
So Dorothy, what is distributed generation?
Distributed generation is the concept that customers can self-generate some or all of their electricity use, basically in small quantities. They use it to reduce their energy bills. Sometimes it's small wind turbines, sometimes, mostly in Kansas, it's rooftop solar. Those are two examples. What we're seeing in today's electricity generation is that it's changing. The structures are changing. Used to be that we had large centralized plants, and more distributed generation customers are generating electricity near them, on their rooftops, on their property, and that energy is used right close to them.
So a couple of my neighbors have just gotten solar. It seems like solar is growing in Kansas. Is that true?
Well, it is growing, but really we still only have across the state less than 700 distributed generation customers. That really equates to like 0.1% of all the power generated in the state is from distributed generation. But the good thing is we're in a fortunate position to be able to really think about what we want our energy future to look like, as well as what the role of distributed generation is going to be in that, while also focusing on helping to grow the distributed generation industry.
So why is this docket relevant right now especially?
So as I mentioned, there is a docket at the Kansas Corporation Commission. It's called a general investigative docket. What that means is that we're all looking at different ways that we can be focused on distributed generation. We're trying to figure out, how much do we have? Where are we headed? What are the next steps in rate design? How do we figure out how this new paradigm works? So what we're hoping for is a thoughtful and comprehensive forward-thinking investigation that will figure out how to lay the groundwork for this kind of, as I said, shifting energy policy that's moving forward.
Would you say that this docket is helping grow solar in Kansas?
This docket would have the potential to help grow solar. As I mentioned, we have such a small amount of solar right now that we've got some time to think long-term about what the future is that we want. The KCC, the Kansas Corporation Commission, is really in a unique position to be able to really thoughtfully consider what do we want going forward. We're not in a position like some states like California or Arizona or Nevada who have 10, 15, 20% of their power generated from distributed generation. We're just barely touching 1/10 of 1%. Although in Kansas we do have a top 5 solar resource that has barely been tapped.
So I currently right now don't have solar on my house. How is it going to impact me, or why should I care about this docket?
So it's interesting when you think about, how is this going to affect the people with solar, but also the people who might be thinking about having solar. One of the key questions, and one of the key questions of this docket has been, what are the impacts on both people with solar or people who don't have it? Is there a net cost or is there a net benefit? And really, it's kind of a tug of war between the utilities and between the solar companies to try to figure that out. What we're promoting, what we're hopeful for, is that we'll have some longer term data collection that will look at kind of what's happening right now and then figure out what's the best process to really think about what's fair for people who have solar, people who don't have solar, but also people who are thinking about investing in solar at some time in the future.
So talking about the process, can you give me some examples of what a good process could look like?
Really, a lot of what we're hearing about in the industry is this idea of the electricity generation of the future, or the utility of the future. And across the country, these discussions are happening. As I mentioned, in some states where there's a lot of solar, these conversations are happening, but also there are some thoughtful conversations happening in states like Kansas that are just getting started with our distributed generation resources. For us, what we think is that a good rate design should include transparent, fair, and an accountable process. We want everybody to have access to the data so that we're all on the same page. It should also be based on credible data and transparent modeling that is publicly available. Sometimes in rate cases that we talk about how we're going to charge people for electricity, all the calculations are done in a black box, and nobody really knows how did you get to those numbers to figure out what those rates are. And so we think having something that has open and transparent data is really going to be key to a good process. We also think that it should take into account the timing. As I mentioned, a lot of states, some states have really deep penetrations of distributed generation. We are not there yet. We are far from being there yet. With less than 700 customers across the state, we're not in a position where we have to rush in and make changes that could potentially have some unintended consequences. This is the key for us. We really believe that good processes include collaboration. And it should be an opportunity for all the stakeholders, people with solar, people without solar, solar companies, utility companies, clean energy advocates like us. We should be able to all come around to the table and collaboratively come up with some solutions. Unfortunately, collaboration takes some time. It's not something that can happen overnight. And so we think that we should be having a good collaborative process, even if it takes longer to do. With low levels of distributed generation in the state, we're really in a fortunate position that the commissioners could really take the time that they need to provide this thoughtful process moving forward.
This sounds really important for the future of energy in Kansas. What can I and other ratepayers do to help?
So one of the key pieces about distributed generation or about energy prices or rates is the public voice. We're all going to be impacted by whatever these changes are that happen moving forward. And so getting your voice out, letting the commissioners know how you feel. What kind of a process do you want? Are you looking for a thoughtful, more data-driven process to make decisions? Or are we just going to say, well, we think it's a demand rate, so that's what we're going to go with? So getting your voice out in front of the commission is really going to be important. We have a lot of ways to do that. You can visit our website, climateandenergy.org, and click on the distributed generation page. We have some really great resources that Jamie's put together. We have some really good links that go straight to a place where you can provide electronic comments. We're happy to help you if you don't know what to say. But most important is really getting your voice out and letting the commissioners know what you think about distributed generation and its future in Kansas. Any questions? Do we have some questions? Well, we're again happy to have this opportunity to talk on our first Facebook Live. What other questions do you have about kind of where we're headed with distributed generation?
I just wanted to see what are you excited most about from this docket?
So one of the things that I'm most excited about is this opportunity for collaboration. Most of the time when we're in a more formal rate process, it's all very legal and very technical, and there's an attorney who sits there with you, and you ask questions through your attorney. I had an opportunity to testify at an energy efficiency hearing last month, and it was a little intimidating, I'm not going to lie. You are sworn in front of the commissioners. However, this process has the potential to really be thinking broadly and more long-term about the future of energy in Kansas. We're really excited. I'm also really excited about the businesses that we're seeing crop up in the state around solar. There's some great solar companies here in Lawrence that are Cromwell Solar, Good Energy, King Solar in Hutchinson, that are really trying to grow their homegrown businesses, and they're employing people in our communities. And we have some real concerns about what might happen with this docket to those Kansas companies. So that would be one of them.
You mentioned earlier encouraging people to comment, and there's different ways to do that, but do my comments really matter? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, we've seen some real examples of ways that people's comments can change maybe the minds of commissioners. A couple years ago, we worked on an energy docket for fixed charges. Pardon me. There was an attempt to get more of your bill to be for fixed charges. And the company wanted a fairly high dollar amount. We had concerns about how that would impact energy efficiency, which is another of the things that we worked on. And so we, brought together Kansans to make comments on that docket, and really over 1,000 public comments were made. And ultimately, the commission decided that they were not going to go with that higher fixed charge. There was only a small increase. And so we've really seen the commission be responsive to what people care about, the things that people say, and so your voice absolutely matters in this conversation.
Dorothy, is there another opportunity for someone on live streaming to hear more about this docket?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Jamie. So on Friday, we're going to do this live stream thing one more time. We're going to take maybe some of the lessons learned from today. We're going to do it 2 more times. On Friday, though, once in the morning at 11:30, and once in the afternoon at 1 p.m. With us, we're going to have Mark Horst from King Solar, and so you're going to have an opportunity to hear a little bit more in depth about the docket, but then really hear from the perspective of a small business owner, a solar installer in Kansas, and what his concerns are about moving forward with this distributed generation docket. So yes, you'll get to hear this all one more time.
Yeah, we encourage you to post questions under this video or on our page. That way we can make sure to get them answered for you.
Yeah, like CEP. Our goal is to get 1,000 likes. We're at about close to 900, so if everybody can take a listen and then like our page, that will really help us meet our goal. You'll get notifications about our live stream opportunities, so whenever we go live, which is something we hope to be able to do often, maybe from California next week, we'll see.
Stay posted for that.
You'll get a notification that we're going live. So, any last thoughts?
Hey, thanks for tuning in.
Thanks to our staff for making this possible, and thank you for tuning in. More information, go to climateandenergy.org. Thanks, bye-bye.